Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves on a tiny speck of volcanic rock stranded somewhere in the endless quiet expanse of the South Pacific Ocean, Easter Island, or as the locals call it, Rapa Nui. The waves lap lazily at rocky shores, whispers carried by trade winds, rustling tall grass that carpets gentle slopes beneath massive volcanic craters. Palm trees sway nonchalantly, as if indifferent to the thousands of miles of isolation surrounding this lonely island. The stars above shimmer brilliantly in skies untouched by city lights. It's tranquil serene, so much so that you probably wouldn't last very long here if survival required more than a hammock and a coconut shell filled with rainwater. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and leave a comment below telling me your location and the local time right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're here on Easter Island, Rapa Nui, the place you've probably heard about mostly through Legends documentaries that your teacher played on days when they didn't really feel like teaching, or grainy travel photos posted by distant cousins on Instagram. And yet being here feels oddly familiar, as if the Moai, the iconic stone giants scattered across this rugged landscape, have somehow been patiently awaiting your arrival, silently judging your choice of footwear, and mildly disappointed in your general level of preparedness. The sun rises slowly with the sort of gentle pace appropriate for an island where hurrying is considered mildly suspicious behavior. You stretch, squinting into the soft dawn, noticing distant silhouettes looming on the horizon. The air here is crisp, slightly salty, tinged with the scent of wild grass and volcanic soil, surprisingly pleasant, even if you're realizing now that sandals might have been an overly optimistic footwear choice. As you trudge along uneven paths, you wonder idly how early inhabitants navigated terrain that makes your ankles question every decision you've ever made. Rapa Nui isn't exactly postcard-perfect beaches and luxury resorts. It's rugged, remote, and stubbornly resistant to modern conveniences, a trait you both admire and lament with each slightly uncomfortable step. Still, there's something calming about knowing that the nearest Starbucks is thousands of miles away. Perhaps you're experiencing the rare joy of being genuinely unreachable, unless the Moai somehow got Wi-Fi while nobody was looking. After some time, the distant silhouettes finally come into clearer focus, your first real glimpse of those famed stone guardians. Even from a distance, you sense their quiet presence, solemn, serene, silently wondering if you brought snacks, and if so, whether you plan to share. They stand lined up on their stone platforms called ahu, perfectly facing inland, their backs bravely turned to the ocean, as if they've been assigned eternal lookout duty, politely ignoring the breathtaking sea views to focus instead on gently disapproving of passing tourists. You approach slowly, respectfully, because after all, these are the Moai Easter Island's timeless celebrities carved meticulously from volcanic stone, their silent faces etched into an expression somewhere between profound wisdom and mild indigestion. Historians still argue whether this stern look represents reverence for ancestors' ceremonial dignity or simply the resigned patience of figures who have witnessed centuries of questionable human fashion choices. As you get closer, details emerge. Stern noses, pronounced eyebrows, pouting lips frozen forever, mid-grumble, and square jaws that could easily land them roles in a Hollywood superhero film. The craftsmanship is astounding, especially considering these monuments were carved with primitive tools, patience, and presumably frequent snack breaks, because, let's be honest, no one chisels 30-foot-tall statues without occasionally stopping for a quick lunch of roasted sweet potato. These Moai don't speak, don't move, yet somehow they communicate a powerful presence. They're scattered across the island like gentle sentinels, silent storytellers who've watched generations of Rapa Nui Islanders come and go, who've survived storms, seen boats arrive full of wide-eyed explorers, and leave filled with slightly confused tourists clutching tiny Moai-shaped souvenirs. Even now, standing before them, you feel vaguely judged by their stone gazes, but reassuringly only in a polite, grandfatherly sort of way. After your first encounter with the Moai, curiosity nudges you gently onward. The path you're on snakes through rolling hills carpeted in rich grasses, dotted occasionally with clusters of wildflowers and scattered volcanic rocks. It's easy, almost comforting terrain provided you don't twist an ankle on an errant pebble and become the newest Easter Island tourist attraction yourself. Around you, the landscape whispers 1,000 untold stories of an island that flourished, mysteriously faltered, and now quietly endures. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, to use its local name, was once a thriving society, one that somehow managed to carve and transport massive stone statues across the land without a single forklift crane or YouTube tutorial. An impressive achievement considering your own struggles assembling IKEA furniture without a minor existential crisis. As you continue your leisurely stroll, you encounter friendly islanders who smile, knowingly, clearly accustomed to the expressions of tourist, quietly reconsidering their decision to skip leg day. Life here is slow, relaxed, and gently humorous. Islanders go about their day fishing, tending small farms, and weaving stories. They're descendants of the skilled Polynesian navigators who once sailed thousands of miles across the Pacific, using only the stars and currents to guide them landing here centuries ago, and deciding quite sensibly that they'd traveled far enough. Today, they seem content to enjoy their modest isolation. You watch children laughing as they chase one another along the grassy slopes, older residents chatting amicably in shaded doorways, occasionally pointing toward you and nodding knowingly, presumably discussing whether you'll figure out soon enough that island time means you'll probably miss lunch entirely. You're welcomed warmly offered simple meals of fresh fish, sweet potatoes, and fruits harvested from modest gardens. It's hearty, nutritious, and slightly embarrassing how much more competent these islanders seem at basic life skills compared to your reliance on microwavable burritos. In the late afternoon, you stroll toward the shoreline where gentle waves lap at rocky beaches. A single fisherman stands knee-deep, patiently waiting to cast his net. He glances at you briefly, nodding politely before turning back to the task at hand, quietly reminding you that patience here isn't just a virtue, it's practically mandatory. After all, when your nearest neighbors are thousands of miles away, what exactly are you rushing toward? You pause to sit on a boulder warmed gently by the fading sunlight and gaze out across the sea, now painted in pastel hues of gold and lavender. The isolation here isn't frightening. Rather, it's comforting, a quiet reminder of simpler times when humans found contentment in quiet conversation, slow craftsmanship, and long evenings spent under endless starlit skies. Tonight, you feel strangely at home. Well, as long as you avoid mentioning your fondness for instant ramen noodles and reliable Wi-Fi. As darkness slowly envelops the island, stars emerge brightly overhead, casting their gentle glow over Easter Island, illuminating the distant outlines of those silent Moai. Tomorrow, you'll discover more secrets of their creations, ponder ancient mysteries, and perhaps share a mildly sarcastic observation or two about your own place within this grand, quiet saga. But for now, allow yourself to settle into this peaceful rhythm. The whispers of waves, the rustling grass, the murmurs of distant island voices all blend into a soothing lullaby, gently coaxing you toward restful slumber. The Moai watch silently over you, eternally vigilant, forever serene and mildly amused that you thought sandals were appropriate footwear for volcanic terrain. Tonight, under their watchful gaze, you rest easier, knowing that on Easter Island, even gentle giants find solace in quiet dreams. As morning slowly slips its golden fingers over the distant ocean horizon, you awaken gently, your eyes fluttering open to soft pastel hues, dancing quietly across the sky. For a brief moment, you wonder if perhaps you overslept. Then you remember on Easter Island there's no such thing as oversleeping, only peacefully existing at exactly the pace the island dictates. Stretching leisurely, you take a deep breath, savoring the fresh, salty air subtly laced with notes of volcanic earth and sweet grasses warmed by early sunshine. Nearby, a few stray chickens scratch lazily at the soil, occasionally clucking softly, as if slightly surprised but thoroughly pleased to discover themselves in paradise. The islanders have long been awake, moving with the kind of gentle efficiency born from generations who realize that rushing anywhere will merely earn amused glances. With a vague curiosity that's somehow both genuine and faintly skeptical, you begin wandering towards another cluster of Moai, their stern silhouettes framed by the rising sun. It's your second day among the giants, and they already feel like familiar, if slightly judgmental, old friends. Approaching these monuments, you begin noticing subtle differences between each figure, variations in posture, minor changes in facial expression, subtle quirks that seem to reflect distinct personalities. Or perhaps you've just been spending too much time alone with the stone statues, and they're beginning to feel suspiciously alive. You find yourself standing now at Ahu Tongariki, the largest platform on Easter Island, home to an impressive lineup of 15 imposing Moai standing proudly shoulder to shoulder like a stone boy band eternally poised to break into a synchronized dance routine. Each figure gazes solemnly inland, steadfastly refusing to acknowledge the ocean behind them, though you suspect it's secretly because they're afraid they might become jealous of the wave's perpetual freedom. The largest among them towers nearly 33 feet tall, weighing roughly 80 tons, numbers your mind cheerfully refuses to fully comprehend. Standing here, it's hard to fathom that humans with nothing more than primitive tools, boundless patience, and a questionable number of snack breaks managed to carve, transport, and erect these stone giants. Historians still argue whether this impressive feat was primarily driven by ancestor worship-friendly community competition, or perhaps just an overly ambitious dare following one too many coconut-based beverages. As you slowly circle the statues, marveling quietly, your imagination gently drifts, envisioning the island centuries ago, bustling with activity, filled with artisans chiseling away at massive blocks of volcanic tuff. You can practically hear the rhythmic clinking of stone hammers echoing across the hills, accompanied by soft murmurs of encouragement, occasional laughter at misshapen noses, and groans of frustration when a critical chip was misplaced. Carving the Moai was clearly not a task for those prone to impatience or frequent existential crises. Your leisurely exploration soon leads you to an isolated Moai, lying on its back face-up eyes, gazing serenely toward the endless sky. This position, though not uncommon today, makes you wonder about the gentle irony of spending months carving a monument designed to watch over a village, only for it to spend eternity contemplating passing clouds and starry nights. Perhaps the islanders had a sense of humor, quietly chuckling at the prospect of their carefully carved ancestors becoming permanent stargazers. Your stomach gently reminds you that breakfast might be overdue, prompting you toward the nearby village of Hongaroa. Here, quiet life unfolds as steadily as the gentle waves lapping at rocky shores. Islanders move leisurely about their morning chores, sharing greetings and soft laughter, children darting around on small errands, elderly residents chatting animatedly on doorsteps, presumably discussing important topics like weather, fishing conditions, and the mild amusement derived from watching confused tourists wander past with inadequate footwear choices. You accept a modest meal of fresh caught fish, sweet potato, and coconut water from a friendly villager, savoring the simple yet wholesome flavors that speak of generations intimately familiar with the island's resources. Between bites, you listen quietly to stories shared casually around breakfast legends of ancestral spirits, gentle gossip about neighbors' garden harvests, and mild complaints about overly ambitious village roosters whose enthusiasm for dawn is perhaps slightly excessive. Fully nourished and mildly sunburned, despite your optimism about sunscreen, you resume your gentle wandering, this time drifting toward the island's southern coast, where waves crash gently against stark volcanic cliffs. Here, solitary Moai stand scattered, some half-buried, others slightly tilted, as if having paused mid-step in a leisurely stroll toward the sea. Erosion and weathering have softened their edges, granting them a tired dignity, as if patiently waiting for their overdue coffee break. Nearby, you spot a smaller, lonely figure gazing stoically out to sea, a rare exception to the inland-facing rule. Perhaps this statue, you muse quietly, simply grew bored of perpetual inland supervision and opted instead to quietly judge the ocean's behavior. You can't blame it. After centuries spent observing human antics, a gentle change of scenery is surely understandable. Gazing at these quiet stone sentinels, you ponder briefly how it must have felt for the islanders who first erected these giants. Did they feel awe pride or perhaps gentle skepticism at their own ambitious project? Did anyone quietly wonder if these statues would someday become a mildly embarrassing topic during ancestral family gatherings? Oh, you made another giant statue today. How original. Eventually, your path winds gently toward the volcanic crater of Ranokau, a spectacularly dramatic spot overlooking the endless Pacific. From here, the island stretches out below a gentle patchwork of green fields, scattered stone giants, and quiet villages. The view, frankly, is breathtaking enough to temporarily distract you from wondering how exactly people with no heavy machinery manage to move multi-ton statues across such uneven terrain. Spoiler alert, historians remain politely divided between theories involving logs, ropes, or mildly optimistic levitation techniques. You linger at the crater's rim, the wind whispering softly in your ears, carrying distant scents of ocean spray and fragrant wild flowers. Time slows, as it tends to do on Easter Island, leaving you gently suspended between past and present, between history and quiet imagination. From this vantage, it's easy to picture ancient villagers quietly going about their daily tasks, occasionally pausing to glance upward at the massive stone guardians keeping gentle watch over their homes. Slowly, daylight begins to fade, casting long shadows across the landscape and washing everything in gentle shades of amber and violet. As evening approaches, you meander toward Anakina Beach, one of the island's rare sandy stretches, home to another cluster of Moai, calmly surveying a stunning panorama of turquoise waters and white sands, presumably resigned to their eternal inability to enjoy leisurely dips or afternoon sunbathing. Settling onto the warm sand, you watch as stars gradually blink awake, spreading across the sky like gentle celestial freckles. Waves lap softly at the shore, a soothing soundtrack that complements your reflective mood. Today, you've wandered among giants, shared breakfast with islanders, pondered historical mysteries, and perhaps even developed a slight superiority complex regarding your patience levels compared to those ancient craftsmen who surely faced frequent snack-induced delays. Now, as you close your eyes, lulled by the quiet whispering of the sea, you drift peacefully toward sleep, knowing tomorrow promises even more gentle discoveries and mildly sarcastic observations. The Moai, steadfast and eternally patient, remain silent companions in your island adventure, calmly witnessing your journey and quietly judging your questionable footwear choices. Tonight, beneath Easter Island's gentle stars, surrounded by history's serene sentinels, you drift softly into restful dreams, comforted by the knowledge that no matter how strange life may seem, there's always a quiet corner of the world patiently awaiting your arrival. Dawn arrives once again, quietly nudging you awake, as if hesitant to interrupt your gentle slumber. Your eyes slowly open, adjusting to the soft glow filtering through the simple wooden shutters of your modest island dwelling. Outside, the distant murmur of waves blending with faint bird calls creates a soothing backdrop, a perfect morning melody tailored by nature itself. You take your time stretching, enjoying the subtle warmth seeping through the cracks and seams of the weathered hut walls. Stepping outside, the mild air wraps around you, comfortably carrying the familiar fragrance of damp earth mingling with salt water, a scent you've quickly grown fond of during your brief island existence. Nearby, villagers go about their morning routines with that gentle yet purposeful rhythm typical of island life, a pace that seems to softly mock your previously held convictions about productivity and haste. You smile quietly, realizing how quickly Rapa Nui has recalibrated your expectations. Today, your curiosity gently pulls you towards something you've wondered about since arriving the humble daily lives of those who created this fascinating culture. Of course, the stone giants, the Moai, are astonishing, mysterious, and monumentally impressive. But the daily lives of those ancient islanders hold an equally soothing charm. Historians still argue whether life here was idyllic, fiercely competitive, or perhaps mildly frustrating due to an overabundance of stone carving deadlines. You stroll leisurely through the village pathways, exchanging brief greetings with the locals, whose smiles suggest a mild amusement at your enthusiastic yet slightly misplaced fascination with their ancestors' lifestyles. You notice fishermen already returning with fresh catches, small groups gathered around nets casually discussing ocean conditions, tides, and the occasional sneaky dolphin who seem determined to assist or perhaps disrupt their morning's work. Nearby, an elderly woman gently weaves baskets beneath the shade of palm fronds, her hands moving steadily, almost hypnotically, as thin fibers intertwine to create sturdy yet delicate containers. She glances up, smiling warmly, as if quietly amused by your fascination with what is to her a mundane task. You realize with a soft chuckle that your life skills would probably leave much to be desired if measured against her quiet mastery of practical crafts. Further along, children dart cheerfully among huts and gardens, their laughter carrying softly through the warm air, blending seamlessly with the gentle rustling of coconut palms overhead. A small group gathers around an older man, methodically shaping a wooden fishing spear, his patient explanations occasionally punctuated by laughter, likely at the expense of an overly ambitious trainee whose enthusiasm outweighs his skill. You pause to admire their camaraderie, pondering quietly how a culture could simultaneously produce stone giants of epic proportions, yet remain grounded in humble everyday joys. Moving onward, you find yourself in neatly cultivated fields, their orderly rows of taro sweet potato and banana trees, carefully tended by diligent villagers. They greet you warmly, offering tastes of freshly harvested fruit, smiling knowingly as you marvel at flavors somehow richer, brighter, and more intense than your usual grocery store fare. You politely suppress an urge to ask about their farming techniques, partly because it seems intrusive, and partly because you fear your modern agricultural ignorance might trigger gentle teasing you'd prefer to avoid. Here, amid the fields, you quietly reflect on how interconnected life is on Rapa Nui. Each task, from fishing and farming to crafting and storytelling, weaves seamlessly into the island's fabric. Everything feels purposeful, harmonious, albeit carried out at an agreeably leisurely pace that makes your former life seem unreasonably frantic in retrospect. As midday approaches, your wanderings guide you toward the coast, where fishing canoes rest gently on the shore, awaiting their next adventure. Island fishermen meticulously mend nets or polish wooden hulls, chatting casually about their ancestors, who once navigated vast oceans without GPS compasses or even an occasional helpful mermaid. You admire their quiet confidence. After all, you find yourself occasionally relying on Google Maps to locate your own kitchen. Settling onto warm sand beneath gently swaying palms, you watch villagers expertly prepare lunch from simple, nourishing ingredients, fresh seafood, grilled sweet potatoes, and an abundance of fruits. Cooking, you notice, is a shared endeavor, undertaken with calm efficiency and a generous helping of good-natured banter. You're invited to partake gratefully, accepting a meal far tastier than your usual hurried sandwich eaten with one hand while checking emails with the other. Afterward, with your belly comfortably filled, you find yourself gently drawn toward an ancient site known as Orongo, perched dramatically atop the rim of the Ranokau volcano. Here, the Birdman cult, an intriguing, sometimes baffling tradition involving daring athletic feats and occasional friendly rivalry, once flourished. Standing quietly among stone houses, gazing out across a breathtaking ocean panorama, you wonder how such a seemingly peaceful society could embrace competitions involving cliff diving and egg retrieval. You can't help imagining early islanders gently mocking participants who hesitated too long before plunging into the sea below. Historians still debate whether these Birdman rituals were primarily religious ceremonies, leadership contests, or simply elaborate ways to settle disputes involving property fishing rights, or whose cooking methods were most questionable. Whatever their purpose, you imagine islanders gathered atop the volcano, cheering good-naturedly, perhaps even placing friendly wagers on competitors, much like your family does during holiday board games, minus the awkward silence when someone inevitably overturns the table. Eventually, the sun begins its leisurely descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of amber and lilac. You slowly make your way back toward the village, now bustling gently with evening activities. Small groups gather around fires, sharing stories passed down through generations, legends featuring ancestral spirits, mythical sea creatures, and mildly embarrassing incidents involving villagers' ancestors accidentally carving moai with expressions that later seemed unintentionally comical. You join one of these gatherings, settling comfortably beside smiling islanders as tales unfold beneath the twilight sky. Laughter rings gently through the evening air, voices blending into a comforting lullaby of history, humor, and heartfelt community. Gradually, darkness deepens, stars twinkling into existence overhead, their light softly illuminating faces gathered closely in friendship and shared memories. Tonight you listen quietly, content simply to absorb this gentle rhythm of daily life, rich, unhurried, full of simple joys and modest humor. As the storytelling fades into sleepy whispers, you rise, bidding goodnight to your newfound friends who nod warmly, understanding your fatigue after another gentle yet enlightening day on their beloved island. Returning to your modest hut, you recline comfortably beneath the protective watch of the silent Moai, who, despite their intimidating stature, seem somehow friendlier tonight, perhaps because you now share secrets of daily island life. Their quiet presence comforts you, silently guarding your dreams as you drift into peaceful slumber. Tomorrow promises more gentle exploration, quiet laughter, and perhaps a mildly sarcastic acknowledgement that the Moai will forever remain better at patiently enduring time than you'll ever manage. But for tonight, beneath soft starlight and the watchful eyes of stone giants, you rest contentedly, deeply grateful for the quiet wisdom Rapa Nui gently shares with each passing day. Morning gently creeps in soft and hesitant, as if politely unsure whether to wake you from dreams, woven gently beneath Easter Island's velvet skies. The cool, slightly salty breeze whispers quietly through cracks in your simple hut, tickling your senses, awake just enough to coax open your eyes. You stretch lazily, noticing how each morning here feels increasingly natural, as if the island itself has gently adopted you, albeit perhaps amused at your persistently questionable footwear choices. Today, curiosity gently nudges you toward a new mystery, one quietly awaiting your exploration: the volcanic slopes of Rano Raraku, the legendary quarry where the Moai were born. You've wondered since your arrival exactly how these gentle giants first emerged from the earth, how blocks of volcanic stone became figures whose silent judgment you've grown oddly fond of. Perhaps today you'll finally learn their secrets, or at least the secrets that polite historians, helpful guides, and your own mildly overactive imagination choose to share. Setting off, you follow a narrow, winding path that leads toward the distant crater. The island, still quiet beneath the softly rising sun, provides ample opportunities for you to contemplate important questions, such as why sandals seemed like a good idea for volcanic terrain, or how islanders managed without YouTube tutorials on stone carving. Around you, tall grasses wave gently, rustling in quiet conversation with passing breezes as if amused by your leisurely pace. As you draw closer, you notice Rano Raraku rising gently from the earth, a softly rounded hill, its slopes dotted with statues in varying states of completion, some standing proudly upright, others reclining comfortably, seemingly waiting for craftsmen who stepped away for a momentary lunch break and never quite returned. Historians still debate exactly why so many moai remain unfinished. Did resources run out? Did priorities shift? Or did workers simply grow mildly exasperated, throw up their hands, and decide a simpler hobby, like basket weaving, might be more fulfilling? Approaching the quarry's base, you're greeted by the sight of enormous statues partially emerging from volcanic rock, as if quietly determined to push themselves free after centuries trapped within stone. You pause, awestruck by these half-born giants, their silent expressions frozen in mild confusion, perhaps wondering why no one bothered to finish carving their noses. Their unfinished state, though poignant, adds a certain quiet charm, as if they're gently mocking the human obsession with perfection. Wandering deeper into the quarry, you encounter more partially carved moai, some barely discernible within rocky walls, others nearly complete, lying patiently on their backs, staring silently upward, quietly pondering clouds drifting lazily overhead. Each statue tells a different story of craftsman's ambition, patience, and perhaps the occasional mildly embarrassed explanation to supervisors about why a statue's ears were carved slightly lopsided. You run your hand over rough volcanic stone, marveling at the primitive tools islanders once used: simple basalt picks, obsidian blades, and abrasive volcanic pumice. Your own attempts at carving pumpkins seem embarrassingly amateurish by comparison. Quietly, you reflect on the astonishing patience these craftsmen possessed, patiently chipping away rock for months, perhaps years, just to coax a single statue into existence. Sitting gently on a warm rock ledge, you gaze around, absorbing the quarry's quiet majesty. Historians still argue over how exactly islanders selected suitable stones, theorizing criteria ranging from quality of rock, ease of carving, or perhaps simply proximity to convenient picnic spots. Whatever their reasoning, the craftsmen clearly took pride in their work, despite occasional setbacks like broken noses or accidentally chiseling a statue's frown into an unintentionally comedic smirk. As the sun climbs higher, casting shadows across silent statues, you notice a particularly compelling figure, an unfinished giant still attached to the quarry wall, emerging from stone as if patiently awaiting final liberation. Its serene expression contrasts humorously with your own tendency to grow frustrated after 2 minutes spent untangling headphone cords. You can't help but admire the stoicism of these craftsmen and their stone creations, patiently enduring centuries without complaint. A local guide, noticing your quiet fascination, approaches, gently offering insights and subtle humor. He shares tales of ancestral craftsmen who took pride in their work, occasionally playfully competing to carve the most impressive noses or intimidating eyebrows. You chuckle softly, imagining friendly rivalries escalating until supervisors had to gently intervene, urging craftsmen to stop adding progressively larger noses simply to outdo their neighbor's creation. Together, you explore the quarry's deeper sections, encountering statues partially obscured by grasses and shrubs, hidden giants quietly biding their time, patiently waiting for someone, perhaps you, to stumble upon their silent forms. Your guide gently explains theories about why the quarry ceased operation, environmental changes, shifting priorities, or perhaps the gentle realization that there were simply too many stone ancestors occupying prime island real estate. Eventually, your gentle exploration leads you toward the crater's interior, where a freshwater lake quietly reflects clouds drifting lazily overhead. The calm surface mirrors the quarry walls, dotted with partially carved statues gazing softly inward, their reflections creating the illusion of statues floating serenely on the water. A sight so peaceful, it temporarily distracts you from wondering how exactly islanders plan to move these giants without a single crane or forklift. You settle comfortably on soft grass beside the lake, sharing quiet conversation with your guide, whose relaxed storytelling style blends gentle humor, historical fact, and quiet pride in his ancestors' achievements. He explains with polite skepticism various theories about statue transport, ranging from clever use of ropes and wooden sledges to more adventurous ideas involving telepathic persuasion or mildly sarcastic motivational pep talks directed at stubbornly immobile Moai. As afternoon stretches lazily onward, your guide bids farewell, leaving you alone among the quarry's quiet giants. You linger a while, savoring the solitude and gently contemplating these statues' unfinished states. Their incompletion somehow feels fitting, a gentle reminder that perfection often remains elusive and perhaps slightly overrated. After all, a Moai missing an eyebrow or sporting an unintentionally cheerful smirk offers gentle charm rarely found in polished masterpieces. Slowly as daylight fades, you meander back toward the village, pausing occasionally to glance over your shoulder at Rano Raraku's silhouette softly darkening beneath twilight skies. Around you, island life transitions gently into evening routines, families preparing meals, friends gathering for quiet conversation, elders exchanging gentle banter about whose fishing nets yielded the most impressive catches. Joining villagers around a modest fire, you listen quietly to stories, tales of ancestors patiently carving giants, friendly competitions among craftsmen, and gentle jokes at the expense of particularly ambitious carvers whose statues occasionally toppled over mid-transport, prompting good-natured laughter. Amid soft, flickering flames, your own laughter blends harmoniously with theirs, a comforting reminder of shared humanity across time and culture. Eventually, sleepiness gently claims you, guiding you softly toward your simple hut, where you recline comfortably beneath the watchful gaze of distant Moai, whose quiet presence comforts rather than intimidates. As you close your eyes, gentle island sounds, waves, lapping shores, distant laughter, rustling palm fronds blend into a soothing lullaby, gently coaxing you toward restful dreams. Tonight, beneath softly glowing stars surrounded by quiet giants, patiently awaiting completion, you drift peacefully, contentedly, grateful once again for the gentle wisdom Easter Island patiently shares. Statue by unfinished statue, morning gently arrives once more, tiptoeing carefully across Easter Island, softly nudging your eyes open with delicate sunlight filtered through gently waving palm fronds. You stretch slowly, savoring the pleasant ache of muscles, gently reminding you of yesterday's explorations, while quietly reflecting that your sandals, now slightly battered, are possibly the greatest comedic subplot of your island adventure so far. Today, curiosity draws you back to the island's artisans themselves, those patient craftsmen who transformed raw volcanic rock into statues, whose expressions range from dignified solemnity to mildly constipated skepticism. You've marveled at their creations, but today, you'll quietly observe their process, or at least imagine it vividly enough to feel like you're gently intruding on their coffee breaks. Heading out from your hut, you wander casually toward an area that historians suggest might have been a communal workspace for the Moai carvers, though debates continue about precise locations, optimal lunch break durations, and exactly how often they stop to joke about whose statue most resembled the village chief. The gentle island breeze rustles softly around you, subtly scented with ocean salt and volcanic soil, enhancing your already relaxed mood. Soon, you find yourself imagining the artisans at work, their modest tools laid carefully on the ground, basalt picks, obsidian chisels, and rough volcanic pumice stones. You envision them chatting amicably as they prepare for their day, sharing news about whose fishing expedition yielded the largest haul, or debating the merits of various sweet potato recipes, because clearly no great artistic endeavor ever commenced without gentle discussion about snacks first. One craftsman steps forward, gently brushing dust from yesterday's carving efforts. You watch in quiet awe as he patiently resumes his meticulous work, methodically shaping features into a serene face emerging from stone. His steady hand moves confidently, carefully chipping away tiny fragments, each subtle tap nudging the stone closer to its final dignified expression, unless he accidentally chips off a nose tip, prompting a mild sigh and possibly humorous teasing from his fellow workers. Around him, other artisans quietly tackle their tasks, occasionally pausing to stretch or share a light-hearted joke about a statue's disproportionately large ears. The atmosphere remains serene, punctuated only by rhythmic tapping, gentle laughter, and occasional murmurs of approval as stone faces gradually emerge. You suspect productivity standards here might not meet modern corporate expectations, but they clearly suit island life perfectly. You wonder quietly how long each statue took months, perhaps even years, to fully reveal itself from stone, and how many craftsmen collaborated gently, patiently, coaxing these giants into being. Historians continue debating precise timelines, often politely disagreeing over whether carving methods prioritized speed, precision, or simply the island's gentle preference for frequent, leisurely snack breaks. Eventually, a craftsman gestures you forward, inviting you to examine his work more closely. You step carefully, acutely aware of your questionable footwear, leaning in to admire the detailed, expressive features gradually taking shape. Up close, you notice subtle marks, traces of individual strikes by obsidian tools that quietly testify to the craftsman's painstaking attention and remarkable patience. You imagine his gentle pride modestly concealed each evening as he surveyed the day's progress, quietly nodding approval and perhaps sharing humble brags about particularly well-carved eyebrows. Nearby, other craftsmen shape the statue's characteristic elongated bodies, occasionally pausing to examine proportions or debate mildly about appropriate shoulder width. You find it amusing how even ancient artists seemed quietly obsessed with physique, presumably due to polite ancestral expectations, or simply because creating statues with less than ideal proportions might attract gentle teasing from villagers passing by. Gradually, you wander over to another craftsman diligently working on a statue's intricately carved back-noting symbolic details, subtly emerging from volcanic stone. You ask gently about the significance, and he smiles, explaining softly how each carving represents ancestral lineage or important community symbols, though he jokingly admits historians still debate precise meanings, possibly inventing elaborate theories to justify their research grants. As midday approaches, the artisans pause collectively, gathering around a shaded spot beneath palm fronds to share a modest meal of fresh fish, sweet potato, and coconut milk. You accept their invitation, joining quietly, listening as they exchange gentle humor, lightheartedly critiquing each other's statues or discussing rumors of other craftsmen attempting overly ambitious projects, such as statues whose heads tilt slightly, perhaps aiming for an expression of mild curiosity, but accidentally achieving one of perpetual confusion. Lunch concludes leisurely, artisans rising slowly to resume their careful labor. You watch them thoughtfully, quietly marveling at how calmly they approach their monumental task, literally monumental given statue sizes often rival modest apartment buildings. They seem unfazed by scale or ambition, tackling each stone challenge with gentle determination, perhaps occasionally wondering if smaller statues might suffice, or if ancestors really insisted on having noses carved quite so dramatically. As the afternoon softly stretches onward, you wander among statues in various stages of completion, some nearly finished, others barely begun, each quietly awaiting their turn to watch over island life. You gently run your hand along smooth surfaces, polished meticulously by pumice, reflecting briefly on how your own attempts at woodshop class resulted mostly in mildly embarrassing birdhouses. Pausing briefly beside a statue, nearly complete, you marvel at its finely chiseled features. Silently admiring the craftsman's precision and dedication qualities, you appreciate even more deeply, now having witnessed their painstaking process. You sense quiet pride and humble fulfillment woven gently into every careful stroke and subtle detail, each statue patiently embodying islanders' reverence for ancestors and gentle respect for tradition. Eventually, daylight softly fades, casting long shadows across craftsmen quietly finishing tasks, gently packing tools away as evening approaches. You thank them warmly for sharing their day, earning amused smiles and good-natured advice about selecting sturdier footwear for future visits. Wandering slowly back toward your hut, you reflect quietly on today's gentle revelations, craftsmanship, patience, community, and mildly sarcastic jokes about statue proportions. Joining villagers around modest evening fires, you listen gently as elders share humorous tales of ancestral craftsmen whose ambitious statue projects occasionally toppled or whose attempts at carving intimidating eyebrows inadvertently produced expressions of perpetual surprise. Gentle laughter weaves comfortably through stories, your own quiet chuckles joining harmoniously, a comforting reminder that humor connects humanity across generations. Later, returning to your hut beneath quietly twinkling stars, you recline comfortably, gazing softly toward distant Moai. Tonight, you feel closer to these gentle giants, understanding better the care, patience, and quiet humor woven into their stone forms. As your eyes gently close, distant waves and soft island sounds lull you toward peaceful sleep dreams filled with patient craftsmen, friendly banter, and statues whose gentle expressions softly mock life's more absurd moments. Tonight, beneath softly glowing skies and gentle silent giants, you drift peacefully, grateful for Easter Island's patient lessons, quiet reminders to embrace life's imperfections, enjoy gentle laughter, and occasionally pause to admire eyebrows carved particularly well. The first rays of morning slip quietly across the island, nudging you gently awake softly, inviting you to open your eyes and greet another serene day, On Rapa Nui, you blink lazily, savoring the familiar warmth creeping softly into your modest hut, mingled with subtle scents of ocean salt and freshly dampened earth from overnight dew. Outside, birds chirp tentatively, as if politely reminding one another not to disrupt the island's tranquil morning rhythm. Today, curiosity whispers gently in your ear, guiding your footsteps toward a particularly puzzling mystery: the transportation of the colossal Moai statues from their birthplace in Rano Raraku to distant ceremonial platforms around the island. You've marveled at their carving and quietly admired their expressions, ranging from dignified solemnity to mild bemusement. But now you can't help wondering exactly how ancient islanders managed this monumental feat without modern conveniences like cranes, forklifts, or motivational playlists. Setting out leisurely, you stroll along soft paths, winding gently among tall grasses and clusters of volcanic rocks, pausing occasionally to admire scattered moai along your route. Some stand upright, observing you quietly, as if mildly skeptical about your enthusiasm for early morning walks. Others recline casually, perhaps taking eternal coffee breaks or simply deciding that upright supervision was overrated. You smile softly, acknowledging their stone wisdom. Arriving at a broad, gently sloping clearing, you pause thoughtfully. Historians suggest this area might have been used for assembling transport crews, though debates continue about optimal statue-moving techniques, ropes, sledges, rollers, or perhaps quietly persuasive pep talks delivered directly to stubbornly immobile moai. You suspect the answer lies somewhere between practical ingenuity and gentle optimism. Imagining yourself among ancient islanders, you envision a large group gathering here early in the morning, sipping coconut water and quietly debating strategy, perhaps discussing whether yesterday's attempt to move a statue using logs worked adequately or ended in mildly embarrassing toppled statue incidents. Their laughter echoes gently in your imagination as they kindly rib one another about overly ambitious plans or questionable rope-tying skills. Nearby, a moai rests horizontally on a sturdy wooden sledge, waiting patiently for transport. Islanders approach calmly, inspecting rope's logs, and the statue itself occasionally sharing gentle jokes about how overly optimistic ancestors must have been to assume this was a practical task. With relaxed efficiency, they position wooden rollers beneath the sledge, checking stability and occasionally pausing to humorously critique colleagues' rope-knotting techniques. Then softly, gently, islanders take positions around ropes, gripping firmly, yet calmly. At a quiet signal, they begin pulling in unison, exerting steady rhythmic force. The statue shifts slightly, nudged gently forward by their combined strength. You watch, mildly impressed, your own struggles, maneuvering bulky furniture through apartment doorways, now seem laughably trivial by comparison. Moving the statue progresses slowly, calmly, each inch gained celebrated with quiet smiles and gentle nods rather than loud cheers. Islanders pause occasionally to reposition rollers, drink water, and politely tease team members whose footwear proves mildly unsuitable for traction, an issue you sympathize with deeply. Historians still argue whether this meticulous technique was consistently effective or if frustrated islanders occasionally resorted to more imaginative methods, such as politely reasoning with statues or quietly threatening them with gentle mockery. You wander quietly alongside the procession, observing teamwork marked by quiet camaraderie and gentle encouragement rather than tense urgency. Occasionally, the statue stubbornly resists movement, prompting patient laughter rather than frustration. Islanders seem quietly confident in their eventual success, perhaps accepting mild setbacks as opportunities for additional snack breaks or light-hearted debate about whose rope-pulling posture looked most impressive. Gradually, your imaginary procession moves gently uphill, rollers carefully managed to prevent backward slips. You imagine islanders politely cautioning each other against overconfidence, perhaps sharing humorous tales of previous transport attempts involving runaway statues, gently rolling downhill, startling innocent chickens, and mildly embarrassing transport teams. forced to politely apologize to village elders for unintended Moai escapades. Eventually reaching level ground, the statue's pace quickens slightly, encouraged by gentle downhill slopes and softly whispered praises from relieved islanders. You follow, leisurely impressed by their quiet persistence and gentle good humor, wondering how many days, perhaps weeks, such journeys required. Historians still debate precise transport durations, occasionally suggesting improbable theories involving teams of dedicated islanders patiently nudging statues forward inch by inch, day after gentle day. Approaching the designated ceremonial platform, or ahu, you observe islanders gently guiding the moai into position. Final placement involves careful maneuvering, subtle adjustments, and softly murmured instructions. A bit to the left, slightly forward, and perhaps occasional gentle critiques about whose spatial awareness proved mildly questionable. Eventually, the statue rests exactly where intended, prompting quiet congratulations and gentle pride rather than exuberant celebration. After all, many more statues remain patiently waiting transport. You linger at the completed ahu, quietly contemplating the effort involved. Teamwork, patience, gentle humor, qualities you appreciate deeply, having witnessed their application firsthand. You softly run your hand along the moai's cool stone surface, silently acknowledging islanders' remarkable ingenuity and calm determination, attributes easily overlooked amid sensational documentaries or overly dramatic historical retellings. As the afternoon stretches gently onward, you drift toward the shoreline, drawn by rhythmic ocean waves softly lapping against volcanic rock. Sitting comfortably, you gaze out across vast, gentle seas, quietly pondering islanders' ancestral voyages, courageous journeys navigated solely by stars, currents, and quiet faith. Compared to that, transporting stone giants seems mildly straightforward, though perhaps still deserving gentle teasing about occasional transport mishaps involving runaway statues. Evening gently approaches, softly painting skies in delicate shades of lavender and gold. You rise slowly, meandering toward the village, where island life gently transitions into peaceful evening routines. Families preparing meals, neighbors exchanging friendly banter about whose day proved most productive, elders softly chuckling over stories involving overly ambitious statue-moving plans or quietly humorous outcomes from attempts to discipline stubborn moai. Joining villagers around modest fires, you listen gently, laughter weaving softly through storytelling tales of transport adventures, humorous mishaps, gentle camaraderie. You feel quietly grateful to share these moments, knowing islanders' gentle humor connects you deeply across cultural and historical divides. Eventually, sleep gently beckons, guiding you slowly toward your modest hut. Reclining comfortably beneath softly twinkling stars, you glance fondly toward distant moai, quietly acknowledging their patient endurance and silent dignity, qualities you've grown to admire deeply. Tonight, you drift peacefully, comforted by Easter Island's gentle wisdom lessons about patience, teamwork, and quietly appreciating life's mildly absurd moments. Tonight, beneath soft starlight and gently watching giants, you rest contentedly, dreams filled with laughter, friendly teasing, and statues whose quiet expressions forever remind you to embrace life's gentle imperfections. Morning seeps gently into your senses, nudging you softly awake with its characteristic courtesy. Eyes fluttering open slowly, you lie still for a moment, listening quietly to distant waves murmuring against rocky shores and birds tentatively rehearsing their gentle morning symphony. Another peaceful day awaits on Easter Island, an island you've grown to adore for its tranquil pace, patient history, and polite disregard for modern urgency. Today, curiosity beckons you toward one of Rapa Nui's most intriguing historical debates, exactly how the islanders managed to stand their colossal stone giants upright. You've marveled at moai carved patiently from volcanic rock, witnessed imagined processes of meticulous transport, but the question of raising these massive statues to their feet remains gently unanswered, cloaked softly in quiet mystery. Rising leisurely, you prepare for another gentle adventure, slipping into your slightly battered sandals footwear, now mildly famous among amused islanders, and stepping quietly outside. Morning air wraps comfortably around you, carrying gentle hints of salt volcanic earth and faint floral fragrances that island breezes lovingly deliver. You breathe deeply, savoring subtle sensations, feeling gently grateful for another unhurried day. You stroll along familiar paths toward a distant ceremonial platform, quietly imagining islanders patiently gathering here centuries earlier, discussing calmly how exactly to stand an enormous statue upright without cranes, hydraulics, or even motivational speeches delivered energetically by modern fitness trainers. Historians continue gently debating various theories, each plausible, yet politely disputed: ropes, ramps, carefully stacked rocks, or perhaps quietly optimistic encouragement whispered repeatedly into statues' stubborn ears. Approaching the site, you envision islanders assembled calmly, thoughtfully assessing their statue lying horizontally nearby, its serene expression politely indifferent to their struggles. You imagine gentle conversations, discussions about optimal angles, rope placements, or perhaps mildly humorous observations about ancestors whose noses seemed exaggeratedly large now that the statue rested at eye level. Patiently, islanders attach ropes securely around the statue, carefully positioning stone ramps or earthen inclines beneath it. Historians still debate precise techniques, whether ramps were meticulously constructed or whether islanders simply piled dirt gently and optimistically politely, hoping for the best. Regardless, you admire their quiet determination, knowing firsthand how easily frustration arises from tasks far simpler, like assembling furniture from cryptic instructions. Slowly, calmly, islanders take their positions around ropes, readying themselves for gentle teamwork. A soft signal passes through the group, and they begin pulling gently but firmly, applying careful pressure, incrementally shifting the massive statue upward. Progress is painstakingly slow, each inch carefully gained, prompting quiet murmurs of encouragement and mild teasing about team members whose rope handling techniques prove humorously ineffective. You watch closely, imagining their patience, quiet confidence, and gentle camaraderie, qualities undeniably crucial when attempting tasks likely to elicit polite skepticism from observers casually watching from shaded areas nearby. The statue gradually rises inch by careful inch, islanders periodically pausing to adjust ropes, reposition ramps, or briefly debate whether ancestors specifically required statues to be this stubbornly heavy. Historians politely argue over how long this painstaking process took: hours, perhaps days, even weeks. You quietly suspect frequent snack breaks, leisurely discussions about village gossip, and mild encouragement breaks contributed significantly to timelines, an approach you now appreciate as entirely sensible given island life's gentle priorities. As the statue nears its upright position, islanders grow slightly more animated, gently cheering progress, carefully stabilizing ropes, and politely warning colleagues about maintaining grip strength. After all, a Moai accidentally tipping backward would surely prompt mild embarrassment during later storytelling sessions around village fires. You imagine nervous laughter, subtle tension mingled gently with quiet confidence, and perhaps occasional mildly sarcastic remarks aimed at colleagues whose rope-pulling posture seemed particularly exaggerated. Finally, after gentle coaxing and patient effort, the statue stands fully upright. Proud, dignified, and silently grateful islanders resisted comedic temptation to carve exaggeratedly surprised expressions onto its stone face. Quiet congratulations ripple softly through the group, modest smiles acknowledging teamwork, patience, and gentle persistence required for success. Islanders gather briefly around their accomplishment, gently nodding appreciation rather than celebrating exuberantly. After all, numerous statues patiently await similar attention. You quietly approach the newly upright statue, marveling softly at its presence. Tall, dignified, and quietly authoritative. Running your hand gently along cool stone, you silently acknowledge islanders' remarkable ingenuity, patience, and quiet humor qualities clearly reflected in every carefully chiseled feature. You imagine ancient craftsmen modestly concealing pride beneath mild jokes about ancestors' particularly intimidating eyebrow requirements. Leisurely, you wander among other upright Moai nearby, reflecting gently on how each required similar patience, teamwork, and quiet confidence. Historians still debate finer details of statue-raising processes, occasionally suggesting adventurous theories involving complex pulley systems, elaborate ramps, or gentle threats whispered directly into statues' stubborn ears. You suspect truth lies gently within practical ingenuity, patient determination, and politely humorous acceptance of occasional setbacks. Afternoon drifts gently onward, guiding you slowly toward island shores, where rhythmic waves softly lap volcanic sands. Settling comfortably, you gaze quietly toward endless ocean horizons, reflecting gently on ancestral voyages, bringing islanders here, journeys navigated calmly by stars' currents and quiet faith. You softly admire their courage, ingenuity, and gentle acceptance of uncertainty, qualities clearly mirrored in later Moai raising efforts. As evening gently approaches, you slowly return toward the village, greeting smiling islanders whose quiet routines gently transition toward evening relaxation. Gathering comfortably around modest fires, you listen gently as elders recount softly humorous tales, stories involving statue-raising adventures, polite teasing about overly ambitious ancestors, or gently embarrassing incidents involving runaway Moai, briefly startling chickens, or amusingly disrupting village activities. Quiet laughter weaves comfortably through storytelling, your own gentle chuckles, harmonizing softly, connecting you deeply with islanders across generations. Gradually, sleepiness softly beckons, guiding you slowly toward your modest hut. Reclining comfortably beneath quietly twinkling stars, you glance fondly toward distant Moai, silent sentinels, quietly witnessing your island adventures, patient reminders of life's gentle lessons. Tonight, beneath soft starlight and watchful giants, you drift peacefully, gently grateful for Easter Island's quiet wisdom, patient teachings about teamwork, persistence, and gently appreciating life's mildly absurd moments. Dreams arrive softly filled with friendly teasing, patient teamwork, and statues whose quiet expressions eternally remind you to embrace gentle humor amid life's softly whispered challenges. Another soft dawn slips quietly across Easter Island, gently coaxing you awake with subtle warmth filtering through your modest hut. You lie still for a moment, listening to the familiar whispers of the island ocean waves, gently murmuring birds, softly exchanging polite morning greetings, and distant laughter of villagers gently preparing for another unhurried day. Rising leisurely, you stretch, smiling softly at the comforting predictability of island mornings, a daily reminder that urgency here remains politely unnecessary. Today, your curiosity gently guides you toward another quietly fascinating aspect of Rapa Nui culture, the carefully constructed stone platforms called ahu, upon which the Moai were reverently placed. You've marveled at the statues' carving, admired their painstaking transport, and quietly pondered methods of standing them upright. Yet you wonder softly about these platforms themselves, structures meticulously built to support giants whose expressions gently suggest mild impatience over centuries spent eternally waiting for explanations. Wandering slowly toward the coast, you approach a serene location where an ancient ahu gently overlooks a rocky shoreline. Historians agree these platforms held deep ceremonial significance, though polite debates continue about precise functions, construction methods, or whether village elders ever gently regretted ambitious platform dimensions that later proved mildly inconvenient. You imagine islanders assembling here centuries earlier, discussing quietly how exactly to build stone platforms capable of supporting massive statues, while perhaps gently teasing architects whose overly enthusiastic plans required stone suspiciously difficult to move without occasional mild complaints. The atmosphere you suspect remained patient, calm, and humorously forgiving qualities island life consistently demonstrates with gentle ease. Approaching closer, you notice details of the ahu carefully fitted volcanic stones arranged meticulously, forming stable foundations whose stability gently mocks your previous attempts at stacking blocks during childhood play. You softly run your hand along smooth stone surfaces, quietly admiring craftsmanship, reflecting patient care, subtle pride, and perhaps occasional gentle mockery of colleagues whose stone placements proved mildly uneven. You envision islanders calmly constructing the platform, methodically selecting stones, carefully shaping edges, and patiently fitting each piece into place. Conversations likely revolved gently around daily village gossip debates over optimal fishing techniques and perhaps humorous observations about whose stone-carrying posture appeared most dramatically exaggerated. Work proceeded leisurely, yet efficiently progress, measured in quiet satisfaction rather than urgent deadlines. Historians still debate exact construction methods, whether stones were positioned precisely by coordinated teamwork, carefully placed using primitive pulleys, or gently coaxed into position through politely whispered encouragement. You softly suspect the truth lies somewhere between patient ingenuity, quiet persistence, and gentle humor, qualities clearly evident throughout island life. Imagining further, you picture islanders carefully leveling the platform surface, occasionally pausing to examine smoothness, or perhaps humorously debating whether ancestors specifically requested flatness standards, measured meticulously, or simply encouraged mildly optimistic efforts. Platform edges received particular attention, shaped carefully, perhaps prompting gentle teasing about stone corners, whose alignment seemed humorously questionable from certain polite angles. As midday approaches, you wander leisurely along the coast, gently observing various ahu dotting the landscape, some pristine, others weathered by centuries of gentle erosion, all quietly dignified. Each platform seems subtly different, reflecting islanders' patient creativity, quiet pride, and perhaps occasional gentle experimentation with innovative stone arrangements, some of which historians suspect led to politely humorous outcomes later quietly acknowledged during village storytelling sessions. Returning slowly inland, you encounter villagers sharing a leisurely lunch beneath gently waving palm fronds. Accepting their friendly invitation, you join quietly, enjoying modest yet nourishing food, fresh fish, grilled sweet potatoes, and coconut milk. Conversation drifts gently, covering topics ranging from recent fishing adventures to mildly humorous anecdotes involving village roosters whose enthusiasm for dawn occasionally exceeds polite community standards. After lunch concludes, you continue exploring, gently approaching another ceremonial platform near the island's interior. This ahu, historians note, politely demonstrates particularly ambitious construction techniques, carefully interlocking stones arranged precisely, suggesting craftsmen whose patience, ingenuity, and quiet confidence were politely legendary. You marvel softly, imagining architects quietly discussing plans, perhaps humorously debating stone placement specifics, while gently reminding each other about ancestors' likely impatience regarding structural delays. Historians politely argue over exact construction timelines, whether platforms took weeks, months, or perhaps gently indefinite periods involving frequent snack breaks, leisurely debates, and politely humorous incidents involving misplaced stones or gently uneven edges. You suspect island life encouraged gentle patience and quiet acceptance of timelines determined naturally by weather fishing conditions or mild disagreements politely resolved through friendly banter. Wandering quietly, you notice subtle symbolic carvings adorning certain platforms, figures gently representing ancestral lineage, spiritual beliefs, or perhaps humorously exaggerated depictions of revered village elders whose distinctive noses remained politely legendary across generations. You smile softly, appreciating gentle humor, quietly embedded within ceremonial contexts, evidence of islanders' subtle understanding that respectful reverence need not exclude polite amusement. Afternoon gently fades, guiding you toward shaded coastal areas where gentle ocean breezes softly whisper soothing sounds. Sitting comfortably, you reflect quietly upon islanders' remarkable achievements, patiently carving statues, carefully transporting giants, constructing meticulous platforms, all accomplished without modern conveniences or impatient urgencies dominating contemporary life. You softly admire their gentle patience, quiet ingenuity, and subtly humorous acceptance of occasional setbacks. As evening softly approaches, you return slowly toward the village, greeting friendly islanders whose quiet routines gently transition toward evening relaxation. Gathering comfortably around modest fires, you listen gently as elders recount softly humorous tales, stories involving ambitious platform construction, polite teasing about uneven stone placements, or gently embarrassing incidents involving overly enthusiastic architects whose ambitious designs prompted mildly humorous community reactions. Quiet laughter weaves comfortably through storytelling your own gentle chuckles, harmonizing softly, connecting you deeply with islanders across generations. Gradually, sleepiness softly beckons, guiding you slowly toward your modest hut. Reclining comfortably beneath quietly twinkling stars, you glance fondly toward distant Moai, silent sentinels quietly witnessing your island adventures, patient reminders of life's gentle lessons. Tonight, beneath soft starlight and watchful giants, you drift peacefully, gently grateful for Easter Island's quiet wisdom, patient teachings about craftsmanship, community, and quietly appreciating life's gently absurd moments. Dreams arrive softly filled with patient craftsmen, friendly teasing, and ceremonial platforms whose quiet existence eternally remind you to embrace gentle humor amid life's softly whispered challenges. Morning gently arrives, slipping through your window with quiet grace, softly nudging your senses awake. You open your eyes, slowly savoring the familiar whispers of Rapa Nui, distant waves murmuring soothingly, birds exchanging polite morning greetings, and villagers quietly beginning their leisurely routines. Another unhurried day awaits on Easter Island, and you rise calmly, comforted by the now familiar rhythm of life here where urgency remains politely unnecessary. Today, curiosity gently draws you toward a subtle yet profound detail that quietly sets the Moai apart from mere stone statues, their coral eyes. These ceremonial additions transformed solemn giants into sentinels who appeared quietly watchful, their gazes softly commanding, yet somehow gently humorous, as if mildly amused by generations of villagers' daily antics. After your gentle morning preparations, you set out leisurely toward a distant ceremonial platform, eager to learn more about these eyes crafted from coral, carefully fitted into statues' stone faces, and respectfully regarded as the final step in bringing the Moai fully to life. Historians quietly agree these eyes symbolized ancestral spirits awakening, though polite debates continue about precise meanings, rituals involved, or whether ancestors themselves gently approved of expressions occasionally resembling mildly exaggerated surprise. Wandering slowly, you approach an ahu overlooking the shoreline, its statues standing calmly, eyes patiently gazing inland. Drawing closer, you pause thoughtfully, imagining the quiet moment when islanders first placed coral eyes into these giants' faces, perhaps exchanging subtle nods of approval or gentle laughter at expressions unintentionally humorous in their eternal seriousness. You imagine craftsmen carefully selecting coral fragments, examining each piece closely, gently debating suitability, color, shape, size, or perhaps humorously considering whether certain ancestors specifically requested coral eyes slightly larger than strictly necessary. Once chosen coral was polished, meticulously smoothed gently into perfect spheres, and carefully fitted into carved sockets, transforming Moai into quietly watchful ancestors whose stares gently conveyed dignity, wisdom, and perhaps occasional mild skepticism regarding descendants' daily decisions. You stand quietly before an imposing Moai, its coral eyes serenely gazing beyond you, silently monitoring village life with gentle curiosity. Historians politely debate exact symbolism, whether eyes represented spiritual awakening, ancestral protection, or gently humorous observations ancestors themselves might have quietly shared about villagers' daily activities. You suspect truth resides softly within subtle interpretations, respectful reverence, and gently humorous acknowledgement of ancestors' likely fondness for occasional polite teasing. Walking leisurely among other statues, you notice subtle variations in coral eyes, sizes, shapes, subtle shading differences, each carefully selected, lovingly polished, and meticulously placed. You smile softly, imagining islanders gently debating coral eye selections, occasionally humorously accusing colleagues of intentionally choosing coral fragments slightly mismatched to subtly amuse future generations, quietly observing statues' gentle gazes. Later, your wandering leads gently toward shaded coastal areas where villagers share a leisurely lunch beneath gently waving palms. Accepting their friendly invitation, you join quietly, enjoying modest yet nourishing island fare, fresh fish, grilled sweet potatoes, and coconut water. Conversation drifts gently, covering topics ranging from recent fishing expeditions to mildly humorous anecdotes involving coral eye installations, prompting village elders' polite amusement. After lunch concludes, your exploration continues gently toward another ceremonial platform further inland. Approaching quietly, you marvel at Moai, whose coral eyes remain strikingly intact, softly conveying solemn authority, tempered gently by expressions subtly suggesting mild surprise, polite skepticism, or quiet bemusement interpretations. Historians politely debate, yet islanders seem gently certain ancestors would quietly appreciate. You run your hand softly along cool stone, gently contemplating the subtle yet profound impact coral eyes must have held for islanders, quietly symbolizing ancestors' eternal presence, gentle guidance, and subtly humorous oversight, quietly maintained across generations. Coral eyes softly transformed statues from mere stone into sentinels whose gazes communicated gently complex emotions. Dignity, wisdom, subtle amusement, perhaps occasional mild impatience with descendants' politely questionable footwear choices. Afternoon gently unfolds, guiding your steps slowly toward island shores, where rhythmic waves whisper softly, gently lapping volcanic sands. Settling comfortably, you gaze quietly toward endless ocean horizons, reflecting gently upon ancestral voyages, navigating vast seas, guided calmly by stars' currents and quiet faith. Compared to those journeys, the task of gently installing coral eyes seems subtly simpler, though likely prompting gentle teasing among craftsmen whose coral choices occasionally elicited politely humorous reactions. Evening softly approaches, guiding your leisurely return toward the village, where island life gently transitions into peaceful evening routines. Families quietly preparing meals, neighbors exchanging friendly banter about daily tasks, elders softly chuckling over stories involving coral eye installations, prompting mild community amusement. Joining villagers around modest fires, you listen gently as elders recount softly humorous tales, stories involving coral eye craftsmanship, politely teasing artisans whose selections resulted in mildly exaggerated expressions, or gently humorous anecdotes about villagers startled briefly upon first encountering statues' newly installed gazes. Quiet laughter weaves comfortably through storytelling, your own gentle chuckles, harmonizing softly, connecting you deeply with islanders across generations. Gradually, sleepiness softly beckons, guiding you slowly toward your modest hut. Reclining comfortably beneath quietly twinkling stars, you glance fondly toward distant Moai, silent sentinels quietly observing your island adventures. Coral eyes gently reminding you to appreciate life's subtle humor and quietly embrace gentle imperfections. Tonight, beneath soft starlight and gently watchful giants, you drift peacefully, gently grateful for Easter Island's quiet wisdom, patient teachings about subtle symbolism, respectful reverence, and quietly appreciating life's gently humorous moments. Dreams arrive softly filled with patient craftsmen, friendly teasing, and coral-eyed statues whose quiet gazes eternally remind you to gently embrace humor amid life's softly whispered challenges. Morning arrives softly, as it always does here on Easter Island, quietly respectful, never rushing. Gentle sunlight filters through cracks in your hut's wooden shutters, whispering softly against your eyelids, coaxing you awake. Opening your eyes slowly, you savor the familiar chorus of island sounds. Distant ocean waves murmuring politely, birds exchanging gentle greetings, and faint laughter from villagers starting their leisurely daily rituals. Today, your curiosity draws you toward the island's quieter whispers, ancient beliefs, spiritual rituals, and gentle stories of traditions softly passed from generation to generation. You rise slowly, stretching gently, slipping into sandals, now humorously renowned among islanders for their persistent inadequacy. Stepping outside, morning air greets you comfortably scented faintly with ocean salt, damp volcanic earth, and wildflowers gently perfuming island breezes. You pause, quietly breathing, deeply grateful for this daily reminder that on Easter Island urgency remains politely irrelevant. Your leisurely stroll leads gently toward Orongo, the ceremonial village perched dramatically atop Ranokau volcano, famed for the intriguing Birdman cult ritual ceremonies involving athletic feats, quiet competition, and polite rivalry. Approaching Orongo, you imagine villagers centuries earlier gathering here, calmly discussing softly whether ancestors specifically requested daring athletic contests, or if ambitious chiefs quietly invented competitions to humorously settle village disputes. Historians agree Birdman rituals held deep spiritual significance, though gentle debates persist regarding precise meanings, competitive motivations, or whether ancestors gently approved of athletic contests involving cliff diving, swimming to distant islets, and politely retrieving seabird eggs without alarming birds unnecessarily. You softly suspect islanders quietly enjoyed subtle humor embedded within rituals requiring competitors to politely risk embarrassment, while villagers watched calmly, gently amused. Standing quietly atop Ranokau, you gaze toward Motu Nui, the distant islet central to Birdman rituals, imagining competitors centuries ago carefully navigating steep cliffs, politely diving into ocean waters, and swimming determinedly toward the islet. You quietly appreciate gentle courage required, particularly knowing polite village teasing awaited those whose performances proved humorously inadequate. Historians gently debate motivations driving these rituals, whether spiritual reverence, polite community rivalry, or simply ancestors' quietly humorous methods of encouraging athletic fitness among villagers. You suspect truth gently resides within subtle combinations of reverence, community camaraderie, and polite amusement at human foibles quietly exposed through ceremonial contests. Wandering among Orongo's stone houses, you softly admire careful construction, low walls, meticulously assembled from volcanic stones interiors, designed simply yet practically. You imagine villagers patiently constructing dwellings, occasionally sharing gentle laughter about architects whose overly ambitious stone arrangements proved mildly impractical. The village conveys quiet dignity tempered subtly by gentle island humor qualities consistently evident throughout Rapa Nui life. Later, your path leads gently toward inland ceremonial sites where ancestral spirits were quietly revered. Islanders believed ancestors' spirits inhabited Moai, silently observing daily activities, offering gentle guidance, and perhaps occasionally politely questioning descendants' footwear choices. You imagine islanders respectfully gathering near statues, softly sharing stories about ancestors' lives, gently acknowledging human imperfections through polite humor quietly embedded within tales. You sit comfortably beneath gently waving palms, reflecting quietly on islanders' spiritual beliefs, ancestor worship, quiet reverence for natural elements, and subtly humorous acceptance of human limitations. Historians agree island beliefs emphasized harmony, balance, and polite acknowledgement of ancestral influence, though debates gently persist regarding precise rituals, symbolic meanings, or whether ancestors themselves quietly appreciated gentle humor embedded within ceremonial practices. Afternoon gently unfolds, guiding your steps slowly toward shaded coastal areas where villagers share leisurely lunches beneath gently rustling palm fronds. Accepting their friendly invitation, you join quietly, enjoying modest yet nourishing island fare, fresh fish, grilled sweet potatoes, and coconut milk. Conversation drifts gently, covering topics ranging from recent fishing expeditions to softly humorous anecdotes involving ceremonial rituals, prompting gentle community amusement. After lunch concludes, your exploration continues leisurely toward another ceremonial site, gently nestled amid volcanic terrain. Approaching quietly, you observe subtle carvings adorning stone platforms, symbols gently representing ancestral lineage, spiritual beliefs, or politely exaggerated depictions of revered village elders whose distinctive features remained humorously legendary across generations. You softly smile, appreciating gentle humor quietly embedded within respectful reverence, evidence islanders subtly understood life's quiet absurdities deserving polite acknowledgement. Historians politely debate symbolic meanings embedded within ceremonial carvings, whether primarily spiritual significance, ancestral honor, or gently humorous commentary ancestors themselves would quietly appreciate. You softly suspect islanders' balanced reverence humor and quiet acknowledgement of life's gentle imperfections, a philosophy clearly evident throughout Rapa Nui culture. As evening softly approaches, you return slowly toward the village, greeting friendly islanders, whose quiet routines gently transition toward evening relaxation. Gathering comfortably around modest fires, you listen gently as elders recount softly humorous tales, stories involving Birdman rituals, prompting gentle community amusement, politely teasing participants whose athletic performances proved mildly embarrassing, or humorous anecdotes about ancestors whose expressions quietly suggested gentle impatience with ceremonial delays. Quiet laughter weaves comfortably through storytelling, your own gentle chuckles, harmonizing, softly connecting you deeply with islanders across generations. Gradually, sleepiness softly beckons, guiding you slowly toward your modest hut. Reclining comfortably beneath quietly twinkling stars, you glance fondly toward distant Moai, silent sentinels quietly witnessing your island adventures, patient reminders of life's gentle lessons. Tonight, beneath soft starlight and watchful giants, you drift peacefully, gently grateful for Easter Island's quiet wisdom, patient teachings about spiritual reverence, community harmony, and gently appreciating life's quietly humorous moments. Dreams arrive softly filled with patient islanders, friendly teasing, and ancestors whose quiet presence eternally reminds you to gently embrace humor amid life's softly whispered challenges. The morning light arrives with familiar grace, filtered through tall palms and softened by the gentle sea mist rolling in from the shoreline. As you stir beneath the thin woven blanket, you already know, without needing a clock, that the day is beginning not with a jolt, but with the same quiet rhythm you've come to expect and quietly love on Easter Island. Another peaceful day, full of soft footsteps and softer stories. Today's curiosity leans heavier than usual. There's a quietness, a gravity in the air, as if the Moai themselves are preparing you for something more somber, more mysterious. You're not here to marvel at carvings or observe cheerful villagers tending crops today. You're walking into the fading edge of history itself. You're going to explore what happened when this once flourishing society began to falter, and how the very culture that gave rise to the towering giants began to crumble quietly with only whispers left behind. As you stroll inland, the air grows cooler, not from temperature, but from tone. You reach a field scattered with toppled Moai, massive, silent, their faces half buried in grass and dust, as though they simply decided to lie down and nap forever. Of course they didn't. They fell or were pushed, and no one knows for sure why. Historians still argue whether these silent collapses were caused by internal conflicts, resource collapse, or simply shifts in social structures. Some suggest the islanders facing starvation or division began to turn on each other. Others believe they may have slowly lost faith in the Moai themselves, once divine protectors now silent and heavy burdens too costly to maintain. You imagine the heartbreak of toppling a statue your ancestors spent years carving and moving. Not rage, not rebellion, just sorrow. You walk among these fallen giants, each lying differently. Some face down in the grass, others tilted to one side, like they were caught mid-thought before they fell. And each one feels like the memory of someone you never met, but know deeply. The sense of loss is palpable, not loud, but gently overwhelming, like the last few notes of a song you didn't realize you loved until it ended. Pausing beneath one particularly massive Moai, you consider the other theories. Some scholars point to deforestation, a slow devastation caused by the clearing of trees for statue transport firewood, or expanding agriculture. The island's rich palm forests, once stretching as far as the eye could see, slowly disappeared. Without trees, erosion worsened. Canoes couldn't be built. Fishing dwindled. Soil grew tired. You imagine the once vibrant fields you saw only yesterday, now reduced to dust, cracked earth, and quiet hunger. And yet others gently challenge that grim narrative, suggesting that the islanders adapted, shifted focus, and continued to find ways to survive. Maybe the society didn't collapse in fire and rage, but simply changed, evolved, became something quieter. A culture doesn't need to explode to fade. Sometimes it just whispers itself into memory. You continue walking through the landscape, arriving at a partially excavated village site. Here, stone chicken coops called Moa dot the area. Once they protected precious food sources, you kneel down and run your fingers over the smooth stones, thinking about the ingenuity of a people blamed for their own undoing, who still tried, even at the edge of decline, to nurture life. A villager joins you, an elder who speaks slowly, as if every word is a stone gently set in place. He tells you stories passed down through generations, not of catastrophe, but of change, of hard times met with quiet resilience, of ancestors who, faced with scarcity, turned to new farming methods, smaller rituals, simpler homes. Not collapse, he tells you, just silence. You sit with him for a while, under the open sky, saying little. There's comfort in knowing that even civilizations like people can slow down, grow quiet, and still leave behind something beautiful. You look up toward a hill where several toppled Moai lie like sunbathers from another world. Their faces remain solemn but no longer feel accusatory, just tired. Later, walking back toward the coast, you stop at a freshwater cave used for centuries. When surface water dried up, the air is cool, inside damp and still. Carvings on the cave walls speak to the quiet persistence of a people who adapted, survived, and whispered their stories into stone. You run your fingers over the etchings, their lines faint but firm. A song without lyrics, a lullaby in rock. You emerge into the golden light of late afternoon, the sea in the distance shimmering as though nothing ever changed. And in a way, perhaps it didn't. The islanders are still here. Their stories still told, their ancestors still watching, not from statues atop platforms, but from within the very soil, wind, and water. That night, you join a small gathering near the beach. A young girl sings a traditional lullaby while her grandfather drums softly on a hollowed log. Flames from a small fire dance in the ocean breeze. No one speaks loudly. No one needs to. The island, even in its decline, never stopped humming. You close your eyes listening to the lullaby and the waves. The Moai are watching as always, not with disappointment, but with quiet understanding. Civilizations rise, change shift, but meaning remains. Stories persist, and sometimes the softest ending holds the deepest truths. Tonight, beneath the wide dark sky, among toppled giants and softly spoken memories, you fall asleep, knowing that silence is not the absence of life. It's a continuation of it. Slower, quieter, wiser. You wake up slowly today, not because the island demands it, but because something in your body tells you there's no need to hurry. You lie still for a few extra moments, listening, not to anything in particular, but to everything at once: the ocean's steady breath, the rustling leaves, the faint cooing of birds, and beneath it, all that peculiar stillness that Rapa Nui seems to wear like a shawl woven from centuries of whispers. There's something different in the air. You can't name it yet, but it tugs at you gently as you rise, stretch, and step barefoot outside. The day greets you without urgency, and as your feet find familiar paths, dusty trails between low stone walls and tall, nodding grasses, you realize today isn't about discovering anything new. It's about lingering in what remains. You make your way slowly toward a stretch of land that doesn't appear in most guidebooks, an area dotted with toppled Moai, some lying on their backs, others face down, half sunk into the earth. Their expressions, once solemn and commanding, now softened by time, erosion, and quiet resignation. You kneel beside one, brushing away a tuft of dry grass from its cheek. Its eye sockets are empty, but it doesn't feel lifeless, just tired. There's a quiet kind of grief here, not the dramatic grief of disaster or war, but the soft, slow grief of being forgotten. These statues were once central to ceremonies, to identity, to purpose. Now they lie in gentle disarray, their platforms crumbled, their purpose unclear even to the people who still live in their shadows. You walk among them like one tiptoeing through a library of unfinished books. Each Moai has a story, and each story ends the same way, abruptly, with a fall. Historians still argue whether these falls were deliberate acts of conflict, rebellion, or even spiritual severance. Some say rival clans toppled one another's Moai during periods of social tension. Others suggest the statues were gently lowered when their meaning faded. And some say the island itself lowered them slowly over time, like a parent easing a child into sleep. You pause near one particularly massive moai, cracked down the middle as if split by quiet sorrow. You wonder if the people who pushed it over, if they did, hesitated, if they placed a hand on its stone shoulder one last time, if they said sorry. And then from this scene of loss, you hear laughter. Not mocking, not loud, just close by, two children barefoot and sun-kissed playing hide-and-seek between the ruins. They duck behind ancient torsos, leap from toppled heads, and giggle at their own cleverness. You smile, surprised, and in that moment, you realize something important. These moai aren't just remnants. They're part of life, part of play, part of memory. Not frozen relics, but gentle landmarks in a living landscape. You sit beneath the shade of a crooked tree watching them. One of the children, noticing you, runs over and offers you a piece of fruit, small, tart, unfamiliar. You accept and thank her in the local tongue. She just grins and darts away, her laughter echoing through centuries of silence. As the sun climbs higher, you explore further, stumbling upon fragments, carved stone hands, earlobes, broken crowns, pieces of a world you'll never fully understand, but one you can feel in your bones. You trace the outline of a damaged carving and wonder who carved it, how long they worked, and what they thought when it broke. Later in the quiet of the afternoon, you return to the village. An elder sits weaving beneath the shade of her porch. You sit nearby, and after a moment, she begins to speak, not at you, but into the space between you. She tells you of the old ways, of how things changed, of how her grandmother saw the last time a moai was placed upright. They were always watching, she says softly, but when people stopped listening, they closed their eyes. You ask what that means, but she only smiles and continues weaving. The thread moves between her fingers like memory itself, fluid, fragile, eternal. As evening settles, you return to the beach. The sky turns a soft peach, and the water reflects it perfectly. A few villagers gather with guitars, drums, and low songs. You sit at the edge of the firelight listening. The songs are old, sung in a language with words you don't know, but meanings you somehow feel. They're lullabies, you think, for ancestors, for statues, for the island itself. Someone passes you a bowl of stew. You eat slowly, savoring each bite, grateful not just for the food, but for the hands that prepared it and the culture that shaped it. You catch a glimpse of a moai in the distance, just barely illuminated by the moon. Even lying down, it feels alive. Tonight, as you crawl into bed, you think not about what's been lost, but about what remains. The earth, the stones, the stories, the laughter. The moai may have fallen, but they still speak. Not in words, but in the way the island wraps around them, in the way children play among them, in the way an elder sings a song that once echoed from volcanic cliffs. You close your eyes, and even in darkness, you can feel the gaze of the ancestors, gentle, steady, and patient as stone. The morning light returns familiar and soft, washing the world in gold like it always has. You wake slowly now, not out of sleepiness, but because the rhythm of the island has seeped into your bones. The notion of rushing feels absurd. Everything worth discovering here unfolds gently like the moai themselves, emerging from rock one slow strike at a time. Today feels different. There's a sense of distant footsteps of other presences, curious, foreign, maybe a little confused. This is the chapter in the island's long dream, where strangers began to arrive with strange ships, unfamiliar customs, and politely baffled expressions. You're heading to Inakana Beach this morning, where oral traditions say the first settlers landed, and where centuries later, the island would meet the outside world again, this time under the hesitant gaze of European explorers. It's not hard to see why they landed here. The beach is quiet, almost sacred, with white sand that feels like sifted bone and a gentle curve of turquoise sea that looks as though it was painted by someone who adored serenity. As you walk along the shoreline, you try to imagine the first encounter, a tall sailed ship edging close to shore, islanders gathering quietly at the tree line, and two worlds looking at each other across the surf, each equally unsure what to expect. There are no moai here that face the sea, you remember, and now you know why they weren't made to welcome visitors. They were made to watch over their own people. History records the arrival of the Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen in 1722. He came on Easter Sunday, hence the island's European name, and found the place both fascinating and perplexing. He saw the statues, the people, and their simple, powerful way of life. And like so many explorers of his time, he misunderstood nearly everything. You stroll among palm trees, picturing the Dutch crew stepping onto this beach, shoes sinking into sand hats, shielding confused eyes from the island sun. They looked around, likely expecting gold conquest, or at least an obvious king. What they found instead was a people who didn't fit any of their maps, people who lived with stone ancestors, spoke a language they couldn't decipher, and seemed completely unimpressed by firearms or European etiquette. Historians note with some dry amusement that Roggeveen's expedition nearly ended in violence when cultural misunderstandings turned into a tense standoff. It's hard to imagine that tension here in this breeze on this beach, but you know how quickly misunderstanding can bloom between those who refuse to listen and those too proud to explain. You climb the gentle slope beyond the beach, where several Moai stand today, restored by modern archaeologists, but still profoundly ancient. You can't help but think about how the early European visitors must have reacted. Towering stone faces, silent, impassive, completely indifferent to foreign flags or ceremonial trumpets. The Moai didn't bow, didn't greet, didn't blink. They simply stared inland as if to say, "You're not the first to visit, and you won't be the last." Over the next decades and centuries, more outsiders would come: Spaniards, missionaries, whalers, traders. Each brought with them their own assumptions and needs, and not all of them left gently. There were smallpox outbreaks, forced conversions, and one particularly dark chapter involving slave raids that stripped the island of hundreds of its people in a matter of weeks. You pause here at the top of the hill, looking back toward the sea. It's hard to reconcile the serenity of the view with the pain of those histories. But this is Easter Island. It doesn't erase the past, it absorbs it. Even the wind feels like it remembers. As the day grows warmer, you walk inland toward Hangaroa, the island's modern hub, passing a small museum that holds fragments of tools, coral eyes, and photographs taken by explorers who believed they were discovering something long lost. You read journal excerpts, look at maps marked with confident, incorrect notes, and quietly wonder how many times the same stones were misunderstood. You find yourself near the remains of early missionary churches, stone simple, and built on sacred land that once belonged to ceremonies far older. There's no plaque explaining the transition, just two histories politely occupying the same space. Later, you meet a local historian, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a voice that feels like warm wood. She offers tea and tells you without bitterness about the centuries of misunderstanding. They didn't ask, she says, but we never stop telling. She shows you records of ancestors relocated to Tahiti, of sacred artifacts now housed in museums thousands of miles away, and of modern efforts to bring them home. But we are still here, she adds simply. And you realize that's the story no explorer ever truly understood. This island was never lost. It was only misread. Evening drapes the island in soft lavender. You walk alone now toward a small ridge above the village where a single Moai stands, not restored, not perfectly aligned, just resting. You sit beside it, your legs folded, your breath slow. From here, you see everything: the village lights beginning to flicker on the distant crash of the ocean, and above, a sky crowded with stars that guided Polynesian canoes across impossible distances. The same stars that watched the first Moai rise, the same ones that watched them fall, the same ones that saw tall ships arrive and leave again, misunderstanding everything but leaving footprints anyway. You lie back, your head resting on the cool earth, and let the story settle around you. The statues weren't built to impress foreigners. They were built to remember, to protect, to endure. And they have. Tonight, under ancient stars and beside a giant who has seen it all, you fall asleep, not as an outsider, but as a quiet listener, just one more soul passing through eyes, closed ears, open heart full. You wake slowly, and this time, there's a new feeling stirring beneath your skin, not the gentle curiosity that's guided most mornings, but something quieter, deeper, gratitude, and maybe a little protectiveness. You've been here long enough now to feel not like a tourist, but like a quiet steward of everything you've seen and heard. Today you'll visit the Moai not as monuments or puzzles, but as companions, ancient presences, who despite centuries of silence have never truly stopped being part of the world. You're going to witness what happens when the world tries at last to take care of them in return. You begin the day walking along a path lined with wildflowers and low grasses, tracing your way toward a site where restoration work is underway. The sun is still low, and the air smells faintly of damp soil and salt. In the distance, scaffolding hugs the side of a fallen Moai. Quiet voices rise and fall like waves as local workers and international archaeologists collaborate with practiced care. There's something sacred about watching people restore something they didn't create. A humility, a reverence. You step softly as you approach, not wanting to disturb the quiet choreography of the team. Brushes dust away centuries of grime. Gloves lift coral eye fragments into place. One person kneels beside a Moai's cracked base, gently mixing a paste to repair what time wind and water have worn down. You speak with one of the workers, a young man who tells you his grandfather helped raise that very Moai decades ago. "We're not fixing them," he says. "We're just helping them sit up straight again." You smile at that. It feels right. Restoration here isn't an act of ownership, it's an act of service. He explains that many of the Moai fell during the island's turbulent periods, earthquakes, civil strife, the long, slow unraveling of resources and rituals. Others toppled, naturally worn down by the same winds that now gently push at your back. Some cracked apart. Others settled unevenly into the ground like giants reclining after a long life. It took generations for people to consider standing them up again. The first attempts decades ago were cautious, equal parts reverence and uncertainty. There were no instruction manuals, no blueprints, just fragments of memory, oral histories, and photographs yellowed by salt and time. Some early restoration efforts were frankly disasters. There are stories of cranes brought in from overseas that promptly broke down in the salt air, of statues accidentally dropped or reassembled with materials that didn't hold. There's even one tale spoken in a tone of polite amusement about a statue whose head was mistakenly placed backward for several days until a child pointed it out. You're shown around the site carefully. Protective barriers keep you from stepping too close, but you can see everything. Cracks filled with resin, foundations being reinforced with traditional stone stacking methods, coral eye fragments fitted back in place after decades in museum storage. Every act is slow, precise, respectful. No one here is rushing. Historians still debate how much restoration is too much. Should Moai be rebuilt from fragments or left where they lie? Does re-erecting a statue dishonor the silence it's kept for centuries, or does it restore something the islanders were never able to finish? There are no clear answers, only quiet decisions made one stone at a time. Later, you visit a site where restoration has already been completed. You stand before a long row of Moai upright proud, their expressions softened by time, their coral eyes gleaming in the late afternoon light. It's easy to forget they spent centuries face down, lost in the grass. The platform beneath them, Ahu Tongariki, is massive, and the symmetry of the statues is almost hypnotic. You walk the length of it, slowly noting differences between each Moai. One has a narrower nose, another a wider mouth. One leans just slightly to the left, as if listening to something you can't hear. And perhaps they are. There's a small sign nearby, nothing flashy, just a wooden plank hand-carved with the names of those who helped restore this place. Locals, historians, donors, families. The names are simple, the gesture quiet, but it matters. You pause there for a while, reflecting. There's something deeply human about our desire to fix what has fallen, to bring upright what time has bowed. But there's also something sacred in accepting that not everything needs to be restored to its original form. Some things find new dignity in their stillness. As dusk approaches, you find yourself drawn back to Rano Raraku, the quarry. You haven't been back since your early days here, and now, with everything you've seen, it feels different. The half-carved statues remain exactly as they were emerging from stone, like dreams paused mid-thought. But this time you don't see abandonment. You see a moment in progress. Not failure, not incompletion, just a breath taken between generations. You sit beside one statue still embedded in the rock. Its face is gentle, its eyes closed. You place your hand against its surface, warm from the sun. And in that moment, you understand that not everything must stand tall to be honored. As night falls, you return to the village where a small gathering awaits you. Locals share stories, play music, and pass around bowls of simple stew. The restoration crew is there relaxed, now shoes kicked off, laughing freely. They tell jokes about cranes stuck in the mud, about puzzled tourists who ask if the Moai are aliens, and about a statue that seemed to sigh when finally stood upright after 300 years. You laugh with them, and then quietly you thank them for their work, their stories, their patience. One of them shrugs and says, "We're just caretakers. The Moai are doing fine." Later, back in your hut, you lie awake for a few minutes longer than usual, eyes tracing constellations through the open window. The stars are bright tonight, the same ones that guided the island's first navigators, the same ones that watched the Moai fall, the same ones that now illuminate the careful hands working to lift them again. And as your breath slows and your body settles, you realize maybe restoration isn't about returning to what was. Maybe it's about recognizing what still is and choosing to stand with it. Tonight, beneath the stars and the quiet eyes of stone companions, you fall asleep not with questions, but with calm. You wake today with a peculiar sense of completion, as if you've reached the end of a long, soothing melody. The dawn arrives gently brushing your senses with soft pastel light. You stretch, feeling in your bones how each day here has coaxed you into a slower rhythm, one not measured by appointments, deadlines, or the incessant ping of notifications, but by the rising and setting of the sun, the ebb and flow of tides, the hush of wind in the grasses. There's a subtle shift in the air, an almost imperceptible note of finality, mingled with comfort, as if the island itself recognizes that your journey among the giants is drawing to a close. You rise without urgency, padding barefoot along familiar paths toward a vantage point that overlooks vast swaths of the island. Below you lies a tapestry of rolling green fields, scattered volcanic rocks, and the stoic silhouettes of Moai poised atop their stone platforms, gazing inland as they have for centuries. In the distance, the ocean glints like a vast mirror under early sunshine. Even now, the Moai seem to exude a quiet warmth, as if granting you a gentle blessing for the travels you've made and the stories you've absorbed. You pause to take it all in, inhaling deeply the salt-tinged air, carrying subtle traces of volcanic earth and wisps of wildflower fragrance. There's an almost nostalgic hum in the wind, a faint echo of your early days here, when the island felt strange, exotic, and full of riddles. Now it feels like a second home, a place where you've shed your modern anxieties, embraced gentle humor, and learned to appreciate time's slow march. You feel the weight of your sandals underfoot, battered as they are, and realize that each scuff, each loose strap marks another lesson. Learn the Moai have taught you patience, acceptance, and gentle reverence for things that endure. Turning your eyes southward, you spot several clusters of Moai you haven't yet visited, some fully restored, others left deliberately untouched. Among them is a half-buried statue, its features softened by wind-blown frost over centuries. Its coral eyes once carefully fitted in ceremonial rituals, a fact historians still argue whether represented ancestral awakening or symbolic vigilance, no longer gleam. Instead, they've been removed for preservation, stored safely by local caretakers who ensure these artifacts remain accessible to future generations. You recall how significant those coral eyes were, a quirky tidbit you heard early on, that the coral was sometimes imported from distant reefs, making each pair a precious gift from far-flung shores, linking Rapa Nui's stone giants to the larger Pacific world. You wander downhill, your footsteps leisurely, each gentle crunch of gravel, a reminder of the countless footsteps that have preceded you. Village children chasing one another in playful hide-and-seek among toppled torsos, archaeologists hunched over digital tablets, debating classification codes, and countless travelers like yourself who came seeking mystery and found kinship instead. Each statue here is a silent storyteller brimming with lineage and lore, yet content to remain mute as you listen. Today you'll revisit Ahuko Te Riku, one of the few platforms where Moai once looked seaward, solemn witnesses to a world they never left. You recall how this placement broke from tradition. Most Moai faced inland, watching over their communities. But here, the sea-facing orientation symbolized connection to ancestors who arrived by canoe, a rare gesture of outward gaze. A mainstream historical fact reminds you that Ahu Ko Te Riku survived a devastating tsunami in 1960 when tidal surges from a distant earthquake in Chile swept the platform clear of some statues, an event that left many fallen, broken, or missing. Restorers later recovered most fragments, painstakingly piecing them together as though attempting to reassemble dreams. Some pieces never returned, lost forever beneath shifting sands. As you approach the site, the early sunlight casts long, ethereal shadows. You see the Moai's rough outlines, cracked chins, weathered noses, and those coral eye sockets, once brilliant white. Today, a local conservation team has installed protective barriers around the partly restored platform, gently guiding visitors along a discreet path that preserves the fragile earth beneath. You step onto wooden planks that span fragile ground, each plank etched with the names of caretakers, villagers, archaeologists, even young children who raised funds at a school fair to contribute to conservation efforts. You pause to read a few names, recognizing one or two from conversations you had earlier. Their inclusion, a gentle reminder that this island is not just a tourist destination, but home to living, breathing communities devoted to preserving heritage. You trail your fingers lightly along the wooden railing, recalling how Moai once held carved hats, pukaos, made of red scoria crowns. Only a handful of pukaos remain in situ, most toppled when platforms collapsed during times of social upheaval. Scholars still debate whether those cylindrical crowns symbolized volcanoes, sacred hairdos, or ancestral regalia. Fringe theories even propose that pukaos were navigational beacons, bright red lanterns for distant approaching canoes, an idea so delightfully imaginative that you can't help but smile. Historians counter that logistical evidence points to pukaos as status indicators. The higher the statue's rank, the larger and redder the pukaos drawn from distant quarries. Whatever the truth, you appreciate how each question remains open, inviting curiosity rather than demanding closure. As you circle the Moai, you notice subtle details: the worn patch on one statue's stone shoulder, where caretakers gently tugged ropes centuries ago to raise it upright after the tsunami. A lichen-patterned crack running down another's cheek, resembling a delicate teardrop, perhaps reminding you of lost resilience or simply the soft passage of time. You remember how early visitors scrawled graffiti on the stone faces, names, dates, cryptic messages like impatient siblings scribbling on a revered family heirloom. After decades of exposure, caretakers now carefully remove residual paint with gentle, non-invasive techniques. Their work, like an act of quiet penance, erases the modern scribbles to honor silent ancestors' dignity. Walking onward, you pause briefly at a small plaque explaining Ahu Ko Te Riku's restoration chronology, first toppled in 1960, fully re-erected in 1969 with assistance from the Chilean government, yet gently reinterpreted through Rapa Nui traditions. Local elders urged conservators to incorporate traditional stone stacking techniques alongside modern engineering. You smile at the memory of an elder insisting, "We built our platform stone by stone with our ancestors' prayers. If you remove that rhythm, you remove our heartbeat." His words echo softly now in your mind, reminding you that heritage thrives when lived, not just displayed. Leaving Ahu Ko Te Riku behind, you wander toward Ranokau's rim, feeling the island's heartbeat in the gentle crunch of grasses and distant chorus of seabirds. The crater lake lies below, quiet and reflective, as if offering its own mirror to the past. You recall how early archaeologists speculated the moats around Orongo's village represented meteor craters or spiritual thresholds. Some fringe researchers even theorized hidden tunnels beneath the volcanic rim, leading to secret ceremonial chambers, though no credible evidence has emerged. Historians still argue whether their origin was purely volcanic or if ancient hands shaped sections for ritual use. Regardless, the crater's solemn waters have borne witness to centuries of birdman ceremonies, the last rites of a religion that quietly surrendered when Moai worship faded. Sitting at the crater's edge, you feel a gentle breeze ruffle your hair, carrying scents of wet stone and sea spray. You gaze out across the island's breadth, an expanse of green slopes, patches of sandy beach, and the shimmering Pacific stretching to infinity. The Moai line ridges and plateaus like silent sentinels, their weathered faces softened by moss and lichen. You imagine islanders long ago pausing mid-song to gaze at this view, offering humble gratitude to ancestors for safe canoe voyages and bountiful fishing. A local guide approaches quietly greeting you with a gentle smile. He's a descendant of maestros who once carved blocks at Rano Raraku, inheritors of transmission lines linking past to present. Today, he's come to honor the final moments you and the Moai share together. Without needing to speak, he hands you a small, carved wooden bird symbol of the Birdman cult, its slender body and outstretched wings a delicate homage to those ancient ritualistic contests. You take it respectfully, feeling its craftsmanship echo the same careful artistry that carved Moai from volcanic tuff. He says nothing, but his eyes convey thanks for witnessing, for listening, and for carrying these stories beyond the island's shores. You stand holding the bird talisman loosely, your gaze drifting toward a distant cluster of Moai partially hidden by tall grasses. One statue lies face down, its torso embedded in earth, as if integrated into the island's body. You recall from Section 11 how toppled statues suggested societal changes rather than violent collapse. Scholars still debate whether those downward falls were emblematic of spiritual severance or simply engineering failures due to eroded foundations. Today, seeing it here, you sense a kind of tender dignity in its repose. It doesn't feel forgotten. It feels at rest, sharing silent companionship with the soil and skies. Walking back toward your starting point, you pass through fields where small pukaos lie gathered like hats left behind at a grand feast. Villagers gather around preparing to redistribute these stones to new conservators. Some pukaos will be displayed in museums for preservation. Others will remain on the island awaiting new platforms that honor tradition and resilience. You overhear optimistic chatter. Perhaps the next generation will see our ancestors rise again, even if only for a moment. The quiet hope in their voices blends seamlessly with the island's hush, offering an unexpected warmth. As late afternoon sun bathes the Moai in gentle amber light, you follow a narrow trail leading to a quiet cove where overturned vessels once brought explorers. A few weathered plaques mark small memorials to sailors and travelers who never returned. You recall how in Section 13 you learned of Jacob Roggeveen's misinterpretations and how brave Polynesian navigators deliberately embarked on transoceanic voyages with only stars and currents to guide them, an unparalleled feat of courage and navigation. Mainstream historical fact. Today, standing here, you feel that same courage echo. The Moai face inward, but you sense their acknowledgement of those who came by sea-seekers of stories like you. You pause at a simple shrine stone slab stacked lovingly, adorned with fresh flowers and seashells arranged in quiet spirals. An inscription reads, "To the island guardians and those who saw beyond." You kneel lightly, touching the rough stones, closing your eyes, and whispering a soft farewell. The wind responds with a hushed caress, as if carrying your sentiment to ancestors across centuries. As twilight draws near, you wander to a final cluster of Moai seven figures standing upon an ahu near a quiet bay. Restored decades ago with international aid and local tradition, combine these Moai face sunset, their silhouettes etched sharply against the fiery sky. One Moai in particular seems to tilt its head slightly toward you as though acknowledging your presence, offering silent gratitude for bearing witness. You settle on a nearby rock, cross-legged as dusk deepens. The air cools gently, carrying the scent of seaweed and wild grass. The bay's waters ripple softly, reflecting dying embers of daylight that dance across the Moai's faces. Here for a moment, past and present converge the quiet hum of ocean waves, the soft chorus of seabirds returning to roost, and the distant laughter of children who still play among these giants, echoes of life persisting amid timeless stones. You close your eyes briefly, recalling everything you've learned, how artisans patiently carved features with basalt picks under sweltering sun. Mainstream historical fact. how scholars still argue whether transporting Moai involved sliding them upright in a walking manner or relied strictly on log rollers. Historians still argue whether the statues walked or were pulled on log sledges, and how fringe theories once suggested alien intervention, an imaginative but thoroughly debunked notion that nonetheless captured popular imagination. With each memory, your heart swells with gratitude for the craftsmen, for islanders, for scholars, even for those early explorers who misread what stood before them. Every misconception, every debate, every gentle joke shared around evening fires has woven together into a tapestry of understanding far richer than any textbook could convey. Night descends slowly, a velvet canopy sprinkled with stars so bright they blur the boundary between sky and sea. You rise, offering one last bow to the Moai, younger, older, upright, toppled, restored, and forgotten alike. They require no words. Their silent presence is enough. You imagine the spirits of ancestors reaching out from stone, offering subtle reassurance that your journey here is part of their ongoing story, not a finite chapter. Turning toward home, you walk back along moonlit paths, fields softly shimmering under starlight. The grasses sway gently, and you hear the familiar hush of coconuts shifting in trees. In the distance, you glimpse islanders gathering quietly at a small bonfire, blaze of orange and gold flickering against the night sky. They invite you with nods and smiles, and you join them, reverently wrapping yourself in a light shawl offered by a kindly elder. Around the fire, elders share hushed tales, legends of ancestors who first glimpsed crimson sunsets here, stories of Moai, carved in long-ago eras, and songs of wind and water that outlast empires. Their voices rise and fall like gentle waves, weaving a lullaby that knits past to present. You feel the warmth of shared humanity, the gentle pulse of community, and the quiet beauty of a place steeped in memory and hope. Finally, you slip away from the fire and return to your small hut. The door closes softly behind you, isolating you from the world's clamor. Through the window, you see the Moai's silhouettes on distant hills, monuments still standing guard, even in darkness. You lie on your simple mat and feel the gentle weight of the night, cool air drifting across your face, the faint aroma of night-blooming flowers, and a distant wave's soft exhalation. You breathe deeply, letting the peace sink into your bones. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, for the final time on Easter Island, you carry with you more than images of stone faces and volcanic quarries. You carry the island's slow heartbeat, its gentle wisdom, its quiet jokes whispered across generations. The Moai have taught you about patience, about humble persistence, about how cultures endure even when stone falls. They've shown you that history isn't something locked in dusty pages, but something alive in every breeze, every laughter, every cautious step toward restoration and renewal. With one last whisper of gratitude, you let your eyelids close. The distant Moai remain steadfast, silent companions in your dreams. Under the same tapestry of stars that guided ancient navigators, you surrender to sleep, knowing that in darkness, as in daylight, the Moai watch over you, guardians, still gentle guides to a world where silence carries the loudest truths. You linger for a few moments between wakefulness and restful slumber, letting the island's tranquil energy settle deep into your bones. There's no rush, no urgency, only serenity. Below, the hillsides soften into sheets of shadow, and above, faint constellations trace ancient paths across velvet skies. In these final moments, imagine walking barefoot through cool grass, feeling dew on your toes as you follow a narrow trail toward a distant cluster of Moai. Their silhouettes stand guard on a ridge, timeless and quiet. A soft breeze carries whispers of ancestors, gentle as lullabies, inviting you to rest. Softly, a melody begins children's laughter from distant fields, the murmur of village elders sharing evening tales, and the rhythmic cadence of waves lapping against volcanic shorelines. These sounds weave together into a song of belonging, reminding you that once you have listened, you are never truly alone. Above, the same stars that guided early Polynesian navigators shimmer with cool light. They wink knowingly as you settle more deeply into your bedding. Feel their gentle presence as they cast silvery patterns on your skin, tracing stories that span oceans and epochs. As you breathe, slowly inhale, exhale. Let every muscle unclench crown of the head, shoulders, arms, spine, legs, and toes. Release any remaining weight, worries of tomorrow, echoes of yesterday, allowing them to dissolve into the hush of night. Your final thoughts drift to the Moai. You've come to know the half-carved dreams of Rano Raraku, the restored sentinels at Ahu Tongariki, the toppled guardians lying peacefully in grasses. Each one stands, falls, and rises again in collective memory, a testament to resilience and continuity. Now feel the warmth of sleep wrap gently around you, a blanket woven from centuries of stories and whispers. Let the island's pulse guide you into a realm where dreams merge with timeless stone, where silence sings, and where gentle giants watch over you.